In a converted warehouse in Austin, a devoted community member was about to face her greatest threat. What started as a peaceful evening took a shocking turn when she came face to face with the brother she'd abandoned. Gabriella Clarkson wasn't your typical spiritual seeker. For 3 years, she had rebuilt her life in the circle of abundance, known for guiding lost souls to belonging. When Jake arrived with damning evidence, she had no idea she was walking into devastating truth. Gabriella's loyalty to her chosen family would lead to discoveries that everything she believed was a lie. What began as protection would become escape. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the converted warehouse, casting golden rectangles across the polished concrete floor where 37 souls sat in perfect silence. Gabriella Clarkson breathed deeply, her spine straight, her hands resting gently on her knees as David Divine Reeves' voice washed over the gathering like warm honey. Abundance flows through us when we release the stories of scarcity that our old families planted in our hearts. David's voice carried the practiced cadence of someone who understood exactly how to reach the wounded places in people's souls. Here, in this sacred space, we water new seeds. Seeds of prosperity, of love, of infinite possibility. Gabriella's chest swelled with familiar gratitude. 3 years ago, she'd stumbled into this meditation circle, broken and desperate, carrying nothing but a backpack full of clothes and a heart full of wounds. Now she was one of David's most trusted facilitators, someone the newer members looked to for guidance and hope. The meditation ended with the soft chime of David's singing bowl, and the room stirred to life with gentle movement and whispered conversations. Gabriella caught David's eye across the circle, and he offered her that special smile, the one that made her feel seen, chosen, worthy. It was the same feeling she'd chased unsuccessfully through 22 years of trying to earn her mother's approval, but here it came freely, unconditionally. "Beautiful session, Gabby." Sage Morrison appeared beside her, brown eyes warm with affection. Her roommate's presence always felt like coming home, something Gabriella had never experienced in the house where she'd grown up. "You're glowing today." "It's the sunrise meditation," Gabriella replied, though they both knew it was more than that. Today marked exactly 3 years since she'd first walked through these doors, and tonight the community would celebrate her quote, abundance anniversary with a special dinner. "I can't believe how different everything is now." They walked together toward the kitchen area, where the morning bustle of preparing breakfast for nearly 40 people created a symphony of belonging. This was family, real family. Not the cold, critical environment where her sister Rebecca had been the golden child while Gabriella scrambled for scraps of attention, constantly reminded of her shortcomings, her failures, her fundamental inability to meet impossible standards. "Remember when you first got here?" Sage's voice held the gentle teasing of someone who'd witnessed Gabriella's transformation. "You wouldn't even make eye contact during sharing circles. Now look at you, leading orientations, mentoring new members." Divine was right about your potential. Gabriella's memory drifted back to that first terrible night, when she'd shown up at the circle's door with mascara streaked down her cheeks and nowhere else to go. She'd finally confronted her mother about the years of emotional abuse, the constant comparisons to Rebecca, the way every achievement was minimized and every mistake magnified. Elena Clarkson's response had been predictable: denial, anger, and the familiar refrain that Gabriella was too sensitive and always playing the victim. The final straw had come when her mother suggested that maybe Gabriella's inability to maintain relationships was why she'd never find anyone who would put up with her attitude. That night, Gabriella had packed everything she owned and walked away from the only family she'd ever known. David had found her sitting outside an all-night diner at 3 a.m, staring at her phone and trying to work up the courage to call someone, anyone, who might take her in. But her contact list was pathetically short. Years of being told she was difficult had made forming close friendships nearly impossible. "You look lost, sister," David had said, sliding into the booth across from her. Even then, before she knew his name or his mission, something about his presence had felt safe, calming. Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even when it feels like the end of the world. He'd talk to her until sunrise about the circle of abundance, about chosen family, about the revolutionary business model that was helping ordinary people achieve extraordinary financial freedom. More importantly, he'd listened, really listened, as she poured out her story of growing up feeling invisible and unwanted. Your family of origin couldn't see your light, he'd told her as the sun came up. But that doesn't mean it isn't there. Sometimes we have to find our real family to discover who we truly are. Within a week, she'd moved into the warehouse. Within a month, she'd started her first online business venture through the Circle's mentorship program. Within a year, she was facilitating workshops and bringing in new members who were just as lost as she'd been. "Gabi, you're needed in the orientation room," Marcus Webb's deep voice interrupted her reverie. David's second-in-command had the kind of military bearing that commanded respect, and his spiritual insights during group sessions often moved people to tears. "We've got 3 new seekers today, and Divine wants you to lead the introduction." Gabriella's heart lifted. Being chosen to lead orientations was one of the highest honors in the circle, reserved for members who truly embodied the community's values. She made her way to the smaller room where 3 nervous-looking individuals sat waiting: a middle-aged woman with sad eyes, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, and an older gentleman whose expensive clothes couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders. "Welcome to your new beginning," Gabriella began, settling into the comfortable rhythm of sharing the circle's story. "I know you're here because something in your old life wasn't working. Maybe you felt unseen, unheard, undervalued. Maybe the people who were supposed to love you made you feel like you were never enough." She watched recognition flicker across their faces, the same recognition she'd felt that first night when David explained how traditional family structures often damaged more than they healed. "Here we believe that abundance isn't just about money," she continued. "It's about belonging to a community that sees your true worth. It's about building businesses that reflect your deepest values. It's about finally having a family that celebrates your successes instead of minimizing them." The middle-aged woman, Sarah, she'd introduced herself, began crying softly. "I just want to belong somewhere," she whispered. Gabriella's throat tightened with emotion. "You already do," she said, meaning every word. "The moment you walked through our doors, you became part of something bigger than yourself. You became part of our family." The orientation lasted 2 hours, covering everything from the Circle's foundational principles to the practical aspects of their revolutionary business model. Gabriella explained how members supported each other's entrepreneurial ventures, how the community's collective wisdom guided individual success, how their innovative investment structure allowed everyone to share in the abundance they created together. By the end, all 3 newcomers had decided to stay for the week-long immersion program. As they filled out their initial commitment forms, Gabriella felt the familiar surge of satisfaction that came from helping lost souls find their way home. "Beautiful work, sister." David appeared beside her as the newcomers were led away for their first business mentorship session. His hand on her shoulder sent warmth through her entire body. "You have such a gift for helping people see their own light. That's why you're so valuable to our mission." Valuable. The word settled into her chest like a physical presence. When had anyone in her biological family ever called her valuable? "I just remember how I felt that first night," she replied. "If I can spare even one person that level of pain and loneliness." "That's exactly why the universe brought you to us." David's voice carried that special tone he used when delivering what he called divine insights. "Your wounds weren't accidents, Gabi. They were preparation. Everything your old family put you through was necessary to shape you into the healer you've become." The afternoon flew by in a blur of business calls, mentorship sessions, and community planning meetings. Gabriella's online jewelry business had hit a significant milestone: $5,000 in revenue for the month, her highest ever. During the evening meal, David announced her achievement to the entire community, and the warehouse erupted in applause and celebration. "This is what happens when we align our work with our spiritual purpose," David proclaimed, raising his glass of kombucha in Gabriella's direction. "Gabi's success belongs to all of us. because we're all connected in the web of abundance. Later that evening, as the community gathered for their traditional gratitude circle, Gabriella felt overwhelmed by the love surrounding her. One by one, members shared how her presence had touched their lives, how her business guidance had helped them launch their own ventures, how her friendship had carried them through dark moments, how her story of transformation gave them hope for their own healing. "When I first came here, I was convinced I was fundamentally unlovable," she shared when it was her turn to speak. "My family had spent so many years telling me I was too much, too sensitive, too difficult, that I'd started to believe it was true. But this community taught me that I wasn't the problem. I was just in the wrong environment. Plants can't bloom in poisoned soil." The circle murmured agreement, and Sage squeezed her hand supportively. "I want every person here to know that if you're struggling with those old voices, those old stories about your worth, you're not alone. We're rewriting those stories together, one day at a time. We're building something beautiful here, something that will last forever." As the gathering wound down and members began drifting off to their rooms, Gabriella settled into her favorite spot by the large windows overlooking downtown Austin. She pulled out her journal, a practice David had encouraged from her very first week. "Year 3, Day 1, she wrote. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, someone who deserves good things, someone who has value, someone who belongs somewhere. The scared, worthless girl my mother raised feels like a distant memory now." David always says that our old families prepare us for our real families, and tonight I understand what he means. Every criticism, every dismissal, every moment of feeling invisible, it all led me here. I think about Jake sometimes, wondering if he's okay. Part of me misses him, misses the boy he used to be, before the family dynamics got so toxic. But he chose to stay in that poisoned environment, and I chose to save myself. Maybe someday he'll find his own path to healing, but I can't sacrifice my peace to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Tomorrow we start planning the expansion to Houston. David says the universe is calling us to reach more lost souls, more people who need what we've built here. I'm honored that he's chosen me to help lead that mission. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I was born to do. She was about to close the journal when a sudden, sharp knock echoed through the warehouse. The sound was jarring in the peaceful evening quiet, urgent, almost desperate. Gabriella frowned, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 10, well past the time when visitors normally arrived. The knocking came again, more insistent this time, and something cold settled in her stomach. In 3 years, no one had ever come to their door this late unless something was very wrong. "Gabi," Sage's voice called from across the warehouse. "Someone's at the door asking for you specifically. Says he's your brother." The journal slipped from Gabriella's hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of her perfect world. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the converted warehouse, casting golden rectangles across the polished concrete floor where 37 souls sat in perfect silence. Gabriella Clarkson breathed deeply, her spine straight, hands resting gently on her knees, as David Divine Reeves' voice washed over the gathering like warm honey. "Abundance flows through us when we release the stories of scarcity that our old families planted in our hearts." David's voice carried the practiced cadence of someone who understood exactly how to reach the wounded places in people's souls. "Here, in this sacred space, we water new seeds. Seeds of prosperity, of love, of infinite possibility." Gabriella's chest swelled with familiar gratitude. 3 years ago, she'd stumbled into this meditation circle broken and desperate, carrying nothing but a backpack full of clothes and a heart full of wounds. Now she was one of David's most trusted facilitators, someone the newer members looked to for guidance and hope. The meditation ended with the soft chime of David's singing bowl, and the room stirred to life with gentle movement and whispered conversations. Gabriella caught David's eye across the circle, and he offered her that special smile, the one that made her feel seen, chosen, worthy. It was the same feeling she'd chased unsuccessfully through 22 years of trying to earn her mother's approval, but here it came freely, unconditionally. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Beautiful session, Gabby. Sage Morrison appeared beside her, brown eyes warm with affection. Her roommate's presence always felt like coming home, something Gabriella had never experienced in the house where she'd grown up. You're glowing today. It's the sunrise meditation, Gabriella replied, though they both knew it was more than that. Today marked exactly 3 years since she'd first walked through these doors, and tonight the community would celebrate her abundance anniversary with a special dinner. They walked together toward the kitchen area, where the morning bustle of preparing breakfast created a symphony of belonging. This was family, real family. Not the cold, critical environment where her sister Rebecca had been the golden child while Gabriella scrambled for scraps of attention, constantly reminded of her shortcomings, her failures, her fundamental inability to meet impossible standards. David had found her sitting outside an all-night diner at 3 a.m, staring at her phone and trying to work up the courage to call someone, anyone, who might take her in. But her contact list was pathetically short. Years of being told she was difficult had made forming close friendships nearly impossible. You look lost, sister, David had said, sliding into the booth across from her. Even then, before she knew his name or his mission, something about his presence had felt safe. Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even when it feels like the end of the world. He'd talked to her until sunrise about the circle of abundance, about chosen family, about the revolutionary business model that was helping ordinary people achieve extraordinary financial freedom. More importantly, he'd listened, really listened, as she poured out her story of growing up feeling invisible and unwanted. Gabi, you're needed in the orientation room, Marcus Webb's deep voice interrupted her reverie. David's second-in-command had the kind of military bearing that commanded respect. We've got 3 new seekers today, and Divine wants you to lead the introduction. Being chosen to lead orientations was one of the highest honors in the circle, reserved for members who truly embodied the community's values. She made her way to the smaller room, where 3 nervous-looking individuals sat waiting. A middle-aged woman with sad eyes, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, and an older gentleman whose expensive clothes couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders. Welcome to your new beginning, Gabriella began, settling into the comfortable rhythm of sharing the circle's story. I know you're here because something in your old life wasn't working. Maybe you felt unseen, unheard, undervalued. Maybe the people who were supposed to love you made you feel like you were never enough. She watched recognition flicker across their faces. The same recognition she'd felt that first night when David explained how traditional family structures often damaged more than they healed. The middle-aged woman, Sarah, began crying softly. I just want to belong somewhere, she whispered. Gabriella's throat tightened with emotion. You already do, she said, meaning every word. The moment you walked through our doors, you became part of something bigger than yourself. By the end of the 2-hour orientation, all 3 newcomers had decided to stay for the week-long immersion program. As they filled out their initial commitment forms, Gabriella felt the familiar surge of satisfaction that came from helping lost souls find their way home. Beautiful work, sister. David appeared beside her as the newcomers were led away. His hand on her shoulder sent warmth through her entire body. You have such a gift for helping people see their own light. That's why you're so valuable to our mission. Valuable. The words settled into her chest like a physical presence. When had anyone in her biological family ever called her valuable? The afternoon flew by in a blur of business calls and mentorship sessions. Gabriella's online jewelry business had hit a significant milestone, $5,000 in revenue for the month, her highest ever. During the evening meal, David announced her achievement to the entire community, and the warehouse erupted in applause and celebration. This is what happens when we align our work with our spiritual purpose, David proclaimed, raising his glass of kombucha in Gabriella's direction. Gabby's success belongs to all of us, because we're all connected in the web of abundance. Later that evening, as the community gathered for their traditional gratitude circle, Gabriella felt overwhelmed by the love surrounding her. One by one, Members shared how her presence had touched their lives, how her business guidance had helped them launch their own ventures, how her friendship had carried them through dark moments. "When I first came here, I was convinced I was fundamentally unlovable," she shared when it was her turn to speak. "My family had spent so many years telling me I was too much, too sensitive, too difficult, that I'd started to believe it was true. But this community taught me that I wasn't the problem. I was just in the wrong environment." As the gathering wound down, Gabriella settled into her favorite spot by the large windows overlooking downtown Austin. She pulled out her journal, a practice David had encouraged from her very first week. "Year 3, Day 1, she wrote. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Someone who deserves good things. Someone who has value. Someone who belongs somewhere. David always says that our old families prepare us for our real families, and tonight I understand what he means." She was about to close the journal when a sudden, sharp knock echoed through the warehouse. The sound was jarring in the peaceful evening quiet. Urgent, almost desperate. Gabriella frowned, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 10, well past the time when visitors normally arrived. "Gabi!" Sage's voice called from across the warehouse. "Someone's at the door asking for you specifically. Says he's your brother." The journal slipped from Gabriella's hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of her perfect world. Marcus's hand rested on the warehouse door handle as Gabriella approached, her bare feet silent on the cold concrete. Through the reinforced glass, she could make out a figure hunched against the Austin night, thin, trembling, with dark hair that looked familiar in a way that made her stomach clench. "I'll handle this," she told Marcus, though her voice came out smaller than intended. He stepped aside reluctantly, his military training evident in the way he positioned himself to intervene if necessary. Gabriella's fingers hesitated on the lock. 3 years. 3 years of peace, of belonging, of finally feeling worthy of love. Whatever waited on the other side of this door threatened all of that. She opened it to find Jake Clarkson collapsed against the doorframe, blood crusted around a split lip, and his left eye swollen nearly shut. His clothes, a wrinkled button-down and jeans that had seen better days, hung loose on his frame. He looked nothing like the angry teenager who'd stormed out of family dinners, nothing like the brother who'd chosen chaos over healing. "Jesus, Jake." The name escaped before she could stop it. "What happened to you?" "Gabby," his voice cracked with relief. "Thank God. I didn't know if I wasn't sure you'd see me. You shouldn't be here." She glanced back toward the warehouse, where curious faces had gathered near the windows. "This isn't. We have policies about family visits. You can't just show up. I tried calling. Your number's disconnected." He straightened with obvious effort. "Your email bounces back. It's like you disappeared completely." "Because I did," she thought. "Because that was the point. Jake, it's late. Whatever this is about. They're stealing from you." The words tumbled out in a desperate rush. "The Circle, David Reeves, whatever they're calling themselves now." "Gabi, they're not what you think they are." Something cold settled in her chest. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I've been tracking their finances for 8 months. He pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket. "Bank records, testimonies from former members, federal investigations. Gabi, it's a pyramid scheme. A sophisticated one, but still." "Stop." The word came out sharp enough to cut. "Just stop. I know what this is. Mom sent you, didn't she? She can't stand that I found happiness without her, so she sends her favorite broken toy to try and drag me back into the dysfunction." Jake's expression shifted, hurt, replacing desperation. "Mom doesn't even know I'm here. She thinks you're in a meditation retreat somewhere, doing yoga and finding yourself." "Then why?" "Because I love you." His voice broke on the words. "Because the sister I remember wouldn't have just vanished. Because something about this place has always felt wrong, and when I started digging," he gestured to his bruised face. "Let's just say some people don't appreciate questions." Gabriella stared at him, her mind racing. Jake had always been the family troublemaker, the one who acted out, who couldn't accept that their mother's criticism came from love. He'd chosen rebellion over growth, chaos over healing. Why would she trust anything he said now? But those bruises looked real. Fresh. Who did this to you? It doesn't matter. What matters is getting you out of here before... Before what? Marcus's voice cut through the night air as he stepped into the doorway. His presence seemed to fill the space, and Jake instinctively took a step back. Is there a problem here, Gabby? No problem, she said quickly. Jake was just leaving. Actually, Marcus's smile held no warmth. Divine would like to meet him. Any family of yours is family of ours, right? That's what we believe here. Jake's eyes widened with something that looked like genuine fear. Gabby, please, just listen to what I have to say. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. She looked between them. Marcus with his calm authority, Jake with his desperate pleading. 3 years of peace versus 5 minutes of whatever chaos her brother wanted to drag her back into. 5 minutes, she heard herself say. But not here. Not where you'll disturb the community. Relief flooded Jake's face. Thank you. I promise, once you see what I've found... 5 minutes, she repeated firmly. Then you leave. And you don't come back. Marcus's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Perhaps we should involve Divine in this conversation. Family healing is one of his specialties. No, Gabriella said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. This is private. Jake and I need to talk alone. The warehouse door closed behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded final. The warehouse felt different when Gabriella returned 20 minutes later, Jake's envelope hidden beneath her meditation cushion upstairs. The familiar warmth seemed forced now, the gentle conversation strained. Or maybe that was just her imagination, her brother's paranoid theories poisoning her perception of home. Everything all right? Sage appeared beside her, concern creasing her features. Marcus said there was some kind of family emergency. Just my brother causing drama, Gabriella managed, forcing lightness into her voice. You know how it is with toxic family members. They can't stand to see you happy. But Jake's words echoed in her mind. 8 months of tracking. Federal investigations. They're stealing from you. Gabi, perfect timing. David's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. He stood near the kitchen island, that warm smile in place. But something in his eyes seemed sharper tonight. We're having an impromptu abundance meditation. The universe is calling us to release some collective limiting beliefs. She nodded, settling onto her usual cushion in the circle that formed spontaneously around David. This was normal. This was home. Jake was wrong. He had to be wrong. I want everyone to close their eyes, David began, his voice taking on that hypnotic quality that always made her feel safe. Feel into the resistance in your body. The places where fear lives. Where scarcity hides. Gabriella tried to sink into the familiar rhythm, but her awareness kept fracturing. She found herself cataloging things she'd never noticed before. How David's gaze lingered on newer members. How Marcus positioned himself where he could see everyone's faces. How the language always circled back to money and commitment. Sarah. David's voice focused on the woman from that morning's orientation. I'm sensing some blockages around your relationship with abundance. Tell us about your fears. Sarah's voice trembled. I've been burned before. Investment schemes. People who promised things. And what happened when you held on to those limiting beliefs? David's tone remained gentle, but there was pressure underneath. Did fear serve you? Did it bring you the life you wanted? No, but the universe is offering you a chance to break generational patterns of poverty consciousness, Marcus interjected smoothly, but only if you're willing to trust the process completely. Gabriella watched Sarah's face, the uncertainty, the hope, the desperate want to belong somewhere. It was exactly how she'd felt 3 years ago. How she'd looked when David first explained the investment ladder system. How each contribution would multiply through the community's collective spiritual energy. Bank records, Jake had whispered. Financial statements that don't add up. Members who invested everything and lost it all. I can contribute $5,000, Sarah said finally. It's most of my savings, but if the community thinks, The community supports whatever decision feels aligned with your highest self, David replied, but Gabriella caught the satisfied glint in his eyes. Marcus can help you with the paperwork after we close. $5,000. From a woman who'd walked in this morning with desperate eyes and nowhere else to go, Gabriella tried to remember her own first investment. Hadn't it been around the same amount? Money she couldn't really afford, justified as an investment in her spiritual growth? The meditation continued, but Gabriella found herself studying faces instead of finding inner peace. How many of these people had invested their life savings? How many were living here because they couldn't afford anywhere else after contributing to the community fund? When the circle finally dissolved, she helped clean up with mechanical efficiency, smiling and nodding at all the right moments. But when Sage cornered her in their shared room later, she couldn't maintain the facade completely. "You've been weird since your brother left," Sage said, settling cross-legged on her bed. "Want to talk about it?" Gabriella hesitated, Jake's envelope burning like a brand beneath her mattress. "Do you ever wonder about the finances here? Like, where our investments actually go?" Sage's expression shifted, confusion replacing concern. "What do you mean?" "Divine's been completely transparent about the business model. We're building something revolutionary together." "But have you seen actual numbers? Profit and loss statements? Proof that our money is being invested instead of just what?" Sage's voice had gone cold. "Gabi, you're starting to sound like one of those negative family voices Divine warned us about. The ones that try to pull us back into scarcity thinking." The familiar shame washed over her, the same feeling she'd gotten as a child when her mother accused her of being ungrateful, difficult, too questioning. She was doing it again, wasn't she? Sabotaging her own happiness with doubt and suspicion. "You're right," she said quickly. "I'm just letting Jake get in my head. He always was good at spreading poison." But as Sage drifted off to sleep, Gabriella lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Jake's battered face haunting her thoughts. Gabriella's hands shook as she pushed open the coffee shop door, the envelope Jake had given her tucked inside her jacket like contraband. She'd told Sage she was meeting a potential business mentor, a lie that tasted bitter on her tongue but felt necessary. Zoe Park sat in the corner booth, exactly as Jake had described. Asian woman, early 30s, with the kind of wariness that came from surviving something terrible. When their eyes met, Zoe's expression shifted from caution to something like recognition. "You have his eyes," Zoe said as Gabriella slid into the opposite seat. "Jake's been worried sick about you." "I'm fine," Gabriella replied automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, I was fine. Until last night. Until you started asking questions." Zoe's voice held no judgment, only understanding. "That's how it began for me, too. One small doubt that unraveled everything." Gabriella pulled out Jake's envelope, spreading the documents across the sticky table. Bank statements, member testimonials, financial records that made her stomach clench with growing dread. "This spreadsheet," Zoe pointed to a particular document. "Do you see your name here? Row 47. Gabriella found it. G. Clarkson. Target investment, $52,000. Current status, $48,300 extracted. Psychological profile, abandonment issues, family trauma, high compliance probability." The words blurred as she read them again. Target, investment, extracted, high compliance probability. "They have files on everyone," Zoe continued quietly. "David calls them spiritual assessments, but they're really vulnerability maps. Your childhood trauma, your emotional triggers, your financial situation, all cataloged and weaponized." $48,000, Gabriella whispered. "I gave them $48,000. I lost $63,000 over 2 years, Zoe said. My parents' inheritance. Everything they worked for their entire lives." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought I was investing in my spiritual growth. Turns out I was just funding David's lifestyle." Gabriella stared at another document. Photos of David's properties in Colorado and California, luxury cars registered to shell companies, bank accounts in multiple states. The man who preached about releasing attachment to material wealth lived like a millionaire. "The business mentorship program," Gabriella said slowly. The online ventures we're all building. Designed to fail. Or at least, designed to break even at best, while you pour more and more money into, quote, business development fees and, quote, spiritual advancement contributions. Zoe leaned forward. Gabriella, you're not building a business. You're being systematically drained. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too loud. Gabriella's perfect life, her spiritual family, her sense of worth and belonging, all of it built on lies. Built on her desperation to be loved. How did you get out? She asked. Badly. I tried to take others with me, warn people. David turned the entire community against me. Said I was having a spiritual crisis, that negative family programming was making me paranoid. Zoe's laugh held no humor. Sound familiar? Sage said almost the exact same thing last night. Because that's how it works. Anyone who questions the system becomes the problem. Your doubt isn't evidence of clear thinking. It's proof you're being influenced by toxic forces. Zoe reached across the table, covering Gabriella's hand with her own. Jake saved my life by believing me when no one else would. Now it's time to save yours. Outside, Austin traffic hummed with ordinary life, people going about their normal day, while Gabriella's world crumbled in a coffee shop booth. David's smile greeted Gabriella the moment she stepped through the warehouse door, but his eyes held a coldness she'd never noticed before. Marcus stood beside him, arms crossed, blocking the path to the stairs that led to her room. There's our wandering daughter, David said, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that now felt like a mask. We missed you at the afternoon meditation session. I had a business meeting, Gabriella replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. A potential investor for my jewelry line. Interesting. David stepped closer, and she caught the scent of his expensive cologne, another detail that suddenly seemed significant. Marcus mentioned your brother seemed quite agitated last night. Family trauma can be so triggering, can't it? The casual way he said it made her skin crawl. Had he always spoken about her pain like it was a tool to be managed? Jake's always been dramatic, she managed. You know how toxic family members can project their own issues. Of course. David's hand settled on her shoulder, the touch that used to comfort her now feeling possessive. But sometimes our old programming can make us vulnerable to their poison. Make us doubt the beautiful life we've built here. Behind him, she noticed other community members gathering. Sage, Marcus, several of the longtime residents. Their faces showed concern, but there was something else underneath. Suspicion. I've been thinking, David continued. Perhaps it's time for a healing circle. Help you process whatever energy your brother brought into our sacred space. That's not necessary. I insist. His grip on her shoulder tightened slightly. In fact, I think it would be beneficial if Jake joined us. Sometimes the best way to heal family wounds is through community witness. Gabriella's blood went cold. Jake's not interested in spiritual work. He's already gone back to wherever he came from. Has he? Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. Because we have reason to believe he's still in the area. Still asking questions about our community. The warehouse suddenly felt like a trap, the warm lighting sinister instead of comforting. How had she never noticed how isolated they were here? How far from help? What kind of questions? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. The kind that suggest he's been influenced by very negative forces, David replied. Former members who couldn't handle the spiritual growth required for our level of consciousness. People who would rather tear down something beautiful than do the work to heal themselves. He was talking about Zoe, about Jake, about anyone who dared to question the perfect world David had constructed. I want to help him, David continued, his voice taking on that hypnotic quality she'd once found so comforting. But I need you to bring him to us. Family calls to family, after all. And if I refuse? The question hung in the air like a challenge. David's smile never wavered, but something shifted in his posture, in the way the other members positioned themselves around the room. Oh, Gabriella, he said softly, why would you refuse to help someone you love? Unless, of course, you've allowed his toxic energy to poison your own spiritual clarity. She understood then what Zoe had meant about the trap closing. There was no good choice here, only degrees of betrayal. I'll talk to him, she heard herself say. David's smile widened. I knew I could count on my most devoted daughter. Gabriella waited until 2 a.m. before slipping out of her room. The warehouse settled into the deep quiet that came when 40 people finally stopped performing community for each other. Sage's breathing was steady beside her, but Gabriella knew better than to assume anyone was truly asleep. David's surveillance extended beyond the obvious cameras. Loyalty was the best monitoring system of all. She found Jake huddled behind a dumpster 3 blocks away, exactly where he'd said he'd be. His face looked worse in the streetlight, the bruises deepening to purple and black. You came, he said, relief flooding his voice. We don't have long. Gabriella crouched beside him, keeping her voice low. David knows you're still here. He wants me to bring you to a healing circle tomorrow. Jake's expression darkened. That's how they handle problem people. Zoe told me about it. Group confrontation designed to break you down, make you confess to being influenced by negative forces. I need to know something. Gabriella pulled out her phone, scrolling to her banking app. The Community Investment Fund. The money I've contributed over 3 years. If I wanted to withdraw it. You can't. Jake's voice was gentle but firm. Gabby, it's gone. All of it. The fund doesn't exist. Not the way they described it to you. The numbers on her screen confirmed what she'd been afraid to acknowledge. Her savings account, once holding the small inheritance from their grandmother, now showed $847. Everything else had been transferred out in increments over 3 years, each one authorized by her during meditation sessions, when David spoke about energetic investments in collective abundance. Oh God, she whispered. I have nothing. No money, no credit, no job outside the circle. I don't even have my old business contacts anymore. You have family. Jake's hand found hers. I know that doesn't mean much after everything that happened with Mom, but I called her. The admission came out in a rush. After I saw Zoe today, I called Mom from the coffee shop. Jake's eyes widened. What did she say? She cried. Gabriella's voice cracked. She said she'd been waiting 3 years for that call, that she knew she'd handled things wrong, that she'd driven me away with her criticism, but she never stopped loving me. Elena Clarkson's voice had been shaky over the phone, filled with a vulnerability Gabriella had never heard before. I know I was too hard on you, she'd said. I thought I was protecting you, preparing you for a difficult world. I didn't realize I was making myself part of that difficulty. She wants to help, Gabriella continued. She's already transferred money to an account Jake set up. Enough for first month's rent somewhere, enough to start over. That's Mom for you, Jake said softly. She'll criticize you for wearing the wrong shoes, but she'll give you everything she has if you need it. They sat in silence for a moment, processing the strange reality that their imperfect, damaged family might actually be more functional than the spiritual paradise Gabriella had thought she'd found. I have to warn Sage, Gabriella said finally. And Sarah, the new woman. She just invested $5,000 yesterday. You can't. Jake's response was immediate. Gabby, the moment you start warning people, David will know. He'll escalate. And not just against you. Zoe said he has members who do enforcement. People who make problems disappear. But I recruited some of these people. Sarah trusted me yesterday because I told her she'd found her real family. I can't just abandon them. You can't save them if you're trapped too. Jake stood, helping her to her feet. The federal investigation Zoe mentioned, it's real. FBI Financial Crimes Unit. They need someone on the inside, someone with access to David's inner circle. You want me to spy on him? I want you to help gather evidence so he can't do this to anyone else. Jake's voice carried an intensity she'd never heard from him before. Gabby, you have a chance to be the person who stops this. But only if you get out first. The warehouse loomed in the distance, its windows glowing with the soft light David kept on all night. For security, he said. But Gabriella was beginning to understand it was for control. Tomorrow night, she decided. After the healing circle. If I can get through that without exposing myself. Are you sure you can do it? Sit there while he tries to manipulate you? Gabriella thought of Sage's trusting smile, of Sarah's desperate hope, of all the broken people who'd found what they thought was love in David's carefully constructed web. I've been performing for him for 3 years, she said. One more day won't kill me. Gabriella's carefully laid plans crumbled at 6 a.m. when Marcus appeared at her bedroom door, his expression grim. Divine wants to see you, he said. Now. She followed him downstairs, her heart hammering as she spotted Jake's backpack sitting on David's desk. Beside it, printouts of bank records, Zoe's contact information, and photos of their coffee shop meeting. Sit, David commanded, his warm facade completely gone. We need to discuss your brother's influence on your spiritual clarity. I don't know what you mean, Gabriella. David's voice carried disappointment that cut deeper than anger. We're family here. Family doesn't lie to each other. Marcus stepped closer and she noticed the outline of something under his jacket. Your phone's been tracked, he said matter-of-factly. The coffee shop, the late-night calls to your mother. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? Panic clawed at her throat. David, I can explain. You've been poisoned by toxic family energy, David interrupted. But healing is still possible. Tell us where Jake is, and we can begin your cleansing process. Through the warehouse windows, she saw other members gathering, their faces confused but loyal. Sage stood among them, hurt and betrayal clear in her expression. I won't betray my brother. David's smile turned cold. Then you've chosen your old family's dysfunction over the healing we offered you. Marcus, please escort our former sister to the meditation room. She needs time to reconsider. Wait. Gabriella backed toward the door, mind racing. You can't just hold me here. People know where I am. Do they? Marcus moved to block her path. Your mother thinks you're on a spiritual retreat. Jake's a paranoid ex-addict with a history of mental health issues. Who exactly would believe his wild conspiracy theories? That's when she heard it. Sirens in the distance, growing closer. Jake must have called the police when she didn't return. You hear that? She said, hope flaring. That's backup. Jake wasn't working alone. David's composure cracked. Marcus, now. Gabriella ran. She burst through the warehouse's side exit as police cars swarmed the building. Jake emerged from behind a patrol car, Zoe beside him, both pointing urgently toward the warehouse. Gabby! Jake shouted, running toward her. Behind her, she could hear David's voice rising above the chaos, addressing the confused community members. This is a coordinated attack on our spiritual family. Remember what we've built here. Some members looked uncertain, but others, too many others, nodded with fierce loyalty, their faces hardening against the outside world that had come to destroy their paradise. As Jake pulled her toward safety, Gabriella looked back to see Sage watching from a window, tears streaming down her face, her hand pressed against the glass like a goodbye. The woman she'd been for 3 years was dying in that warehouse, but the person she was becoming was finally free to breathe. 6 weeks later, Gabriella sat across from FBI agent Sarah Chen in a sterile conference room, a stack of documents between them and a recording device capturing every word. Her hands no longer shook when she spoke about David, but the weight of what she was doing pressed against her chest like a stone. Tell me about the recruitment process, Agent Chen said gently. How did David target new members? He looked for broken people, Gabriella replied, her voice steady despite the pain of remembering. People who'd been hurt by their families, who were financially vulnerable, emotionally isolated. He'd find us at our lowest points and offer exactly what we needed most. She detailed the psychological manipulation techniques, the financial exploitation, the way David weaponized their need for belonging against them. Each revelation felt like betraying Sage, like destroying the only home some of these people had ever known. The investment ladder system was genius in its simplicity, she continued. Start small, then gradually increase contributions. By the time you realize you've given everything, you're so financially and emotionally dependent on the circle that leaving feels impossible. Agent Chen showed her surveillance photos of David's properties, the Colorado mansion, the fleet of luxury cars, the offshore accounts, all funded by people like her, people who thought they were investing in spiritual growth. We estimate he's stolen over $3 million from approximately 200 victims across 4 states, Agent Chen said. Your testimony is crucial to establishing the pattern of psychological manipulation. Through the conference room window, Gabriella could see news vans gathering outside. The story was breaking today. By tonight, her face would be on every major network, identified as the whistleblower who brought down the Circle of Abundance. Some of them will never forgive me, she said quietly. But some of them will thank you, Agent Chen replied. You're giving them the chance to heal from the truth instead of the lie. Gabriella thought of Sage, still defending David even after his arrest. Some bonds, she was learning, took longer to break than others. But for the first time in years, she was choosing truth over comfort, justice over belonging. It felt like freedom. The federal courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and former Circle members when David Divine Reeves was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. Gabriella watched from across the street, unable to face the cameras but needing to witness this moment. Gabriella Clarkson's courage in coming forward has saved countless future victims, the prosecutor announced to the press. This case demonstrates how predators exploit our most basic human need, the desire to belong. Through the crowd, she spotted familiar faces. Some looked relieved, finally free from David's influence. Others appeared lost, displaced from the only community they'd known. A few shot hostile glances in her direction, true believers who saw her as the destroyer of their spiritual family. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sage, watching the news. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. Can we talk? 3 months of silence, broken at last. Gabriella typed back, yes, when you're ready. More messages followed. From Sarah, the woman who'd invested her last $5,000, thanking Gabriella for saving her from losing more. From other former members who were slowly rebuilding their lives. From Jake, who'd watched the sentencing from the front row. Justice served. Mom's making dinner if you want to come over. The idea of family dinner, messy, imperfect, real family dinner, no longer terrified her. David's conviction made national news, sparking conversations about cult recruitment and financial fraud. Gabriella had been invited to speak at conferences, to help law enforcement recognize similar schemes. Her pain was becoming purpose. As the crowd dispersed, she noticed a young woman standing alone by the courthouse steps, crying, lost, vulnerable, exactly the type David used to target. Gabriella crossed the street. Are you all right? She asked gently. The woman looked up, eyes red with tears. I thought I'd found my real family, she whispered. Now I don't know who I am anymore. That's okay, Gabriella said, offering her hand. Neither did I. But that's where healing really begins. 8 months after David's sentencing, Gabriella sat in a circle of folding chairs in the community center, watching 12 faces that mirrored her own journey. Former Circle members, survivors from other cults, family members learning to heal, all searching for authentic connection after manufactured belonging. Recovery isn't about finding a new perfect family, she told the group, her voice steady with hard-won wisdom. It's about learning to love yourself enough that you don't need anyone else's validation to feel worthy. Sarah raised her hand tentatively. But how do you trust your instincts again, after being told for so long that your doubts were just negative programming? You start small, Gabriella replied. You notice when something feels off, and you don't immediately blame yourself for feeling it. You ask questions without apologizing for asking them. After the meeting, Jake waited by her car, scrolling through his phone. Another inquiry about the consulting business, he said as she approached. A law enforcement agency in Colorado wants you to train their officers on cult recruitment tactics. Gabriella's anti-cult consulting work had grown organically from her testimony. Helping others recognize manipulation felt like turning her deepest wounds into something useful, something healing. They drove to Elena's house through the Austin evening. past the warehouse district where the Circle had once operated. The building housed a legitimate tech startup now, the spiritual facade completely erased. How was Group? Elena asked, setting down 3 plates of enchiladas, a weekly ritual they'd established over the past months. Emotional. We talked about forgiveness tonight. How you can forgive someone without trusting them again. Elena's hand stilled on her coffee mug. Are you talking about David? Or both? All of us. Gabriella met her mother's eyes. I'm learning that forgiveness isn't about pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's about refusing to let that hurt define your future. Through the window, she could see her father's latest letter on the kitchen counter, his 3rd attempt at reconciliation. She wasn't ready for that conversation yet, but she no longer felt the old panic at the sight of his handwriting. I got accepted to graduate school, she announced, surprising herself with the words. Business administration, with a focus on nonprofit management. I want to start a foundation. Help cult survivors rebuild their lives. Jake grinned. That's incredible, Gabby. Elena reached across the table, squeezing her daughter's hand. I'm proud of you. Not for what you've accomplished, for who you've become. Outside, Austin hummed with ordinary life. Inside, a damaged family worked to rebuild itself with honesty instead of illusion. It wasn't perfect. It was better than perfect. It was real. And that, Gabriella had learned, made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.